Hello, G. Hello, Kane. Kane, can I just ask you, Wiggy? Where did Wiggy come from? I just heard that throughout the whole interview.
It's an old nickname to do with a poor haircut that I had one time, and it was just one of those ones that stuck. So not an exciting story, Hoynie. Not an exotic nickname, but one that stuck with the playing group.
What sort of season has Ollie Wines had?
He's had a different year. His numbers are well down on previous years purely because I think of the role that he's played this year, as you alluded to there in his questioning, moving out to the wing, which we haven't really seen Ollie do pretty much throughout his 10 years. So he has played a slightly different role, and therefore his impact has dropped as a result.
Did you get the jitters over the week, having no games to analyse?
It was absolutely sensational. I think I'm one of the only ones that actually enjoy the pre-finals bye, just to put your feet up and actually see some friends for the first time in 6 months that you haven't seen. So, but. Now we're ready to rock and roll, 48 hours, and now ready to absolutely get into it.
Yeah, no, I was with you, Hoynie, until Qantas cancelled my flight, and I had to get Alan Joyce single-handedly sacked myself. So that just the influence
Strong effort from you.
my wife asked me that question on Sunday as we're having a coffee, came watching that, and my wife turned and goes, "Isn't he meant to be in a full suit here?" And I said, "Yeah, I don't know what's going on here."
What do you think of Richard Yorda's role? Do you think he should have been clipped too?
He can probably go too, Jared. His time has probably come as well. A couple of people have asked me if I could line up Dan Andrews next, so I'll see what I can do there. But we're here to talk footy. What's your overall observation?
So overall observation, just want to put this on the table, and we get asked about this pretty much every year, and I just want to have the discussion with the two of you in terms of what actually does change in finals footy compared to the home and away
Fantastic.
season.
So I hope you deal on the pressure gauge.
So we've just purely just looking at the last 5 years and what actually changes, and it's really, really simple in terms of what changes. So the ability to be able to win contested footy doesn't change. So the contested possession numbers are still the same. What does drop off significantly is your ability to be able to win easy ball. So the uncontested possession game is what drops off. And the ability to be able to control the game through playing a marking style of game significantly drops off. So over the last 5 years, average marks per team per game is 90 in home and away matches. That drops to 80. So there is a little bit of a concern around if that is your method and your choice of play.
So can I butt in there? Tell me who that affects most in a negative sense in their style.
So it only really impacts two finalists this year, and the Saints are one. So no one over the last 6 weeks takes more uncontested marks than what St Kilda do. And then Brisbane are the other one. They're fourth in the competition. Collingwood, Melbourne, Port, GWS, Sydney, doesn't really impact them. So, you go to Thursday night, Melbourne, Collingwood, going to be a wet night. People go, who's that going to favour? Doesn't really favour anyone. Neither team rely on the marking game. Whereas, St Kilda, I think the On The Couch guys last night were sort of alluding to 110 marks is sort of, the number for St Kilda, which is sort of, correlated to a large sort of portion of their wins this year. That's a high number where you're sort of relying on, and whether or not you can do that in a finals campaign. So the marking game and the uncontested game, that's what sort of gets diminished, and the pressure game goes up slightly. Doesn't go up, enormously, but it goes up slightly. So they're just a couple of the areas to sort of look for. So the players that are relying on the outside ball, sort of come finals time, are the ones that are probably going to find it hard. And if you just go back to last year's final series, and you go back to the Melbourne-Sydney qualifying final, almost 1-to-1 contested possession to uncontested possession. Brisbane v Richmond elimination final, almost the same. Sydney-Collingwood prelim, almost the same. And then the one that still stands out in my mind is what Collingwood did to Geelong in that qualifying final last year. Geelong win a flag by 14 goals and win a prelim by 13 goals. No one got near him, apart from Collingwood, who forced Geelong to almost go one contested possession to one uncontested possession. So that's the aspect of the game that does change significantly.
Looking to the sides that didn't make the finals, who would need to change the way they're playing the game to compete, having relied so much on the uncontested ball?
So probably, so you're probably looking a little bit at West Coast. They did try and change a little bit this year, but probably still have a little way to go. And then you're probably looking at, teams that are sort of, towards the bottom end of the ladder, sort of, the Fremantle types, potentially Hawthorn with what they did towards the second half of last year. But they're sort of, at different stages of their development, given how young they actually are.
If you've got a question for Horny, send it through, or better still, you can give us a call on the Harcourts open line. Happy to take a call or two from you. This one I'll get to now is in relation to Carlton. Horny, can you put an end to the Harry Mackay debate by giving us Charlie's ratings in games where they both play versus games on his own? My guess would be Charlie performs better than Harry there. We'll give you some time to chase those numbers up in the next little break that we have. But let's move on to Thursday night. Whilst you do that, let's go through this one. I can't split it. Horny, I think your overall thought is that Melbourne probably just ahead in terms of the way this game's going to be played. Is that fair?
Yeah, probably just, but not much in it. Not much in it. I'd be tipping Melbourne if I was sort of, probably a 55-45 sort of ratio in that. But yeah, absolutely not too much in it as well. So what we sort of wanted to do tonight is just break down the 4 games and just have a look at the strength areas of both teams and how that actually compares to the opposition, and then just put some players on the agenda just to highlight, from a positive sense and, a need for improvement. So, we've talked, a lot about on this show this year just how good Collingwood's ball movement game is, and that ball movement game does come, a lot from that halfback area. It doesn't come from deep in their defensive 50. So no one over the last 6 weeks is scoring more than what Collingwood does in the competition off that halfback line. 5 goals a game. It's miles ahead above anyone else in the competition. Then you go to the flip side and you go, well, how well do Melbourne defend that? Melbourne are the second hardest team in the competition to score off that.
Yep.
So you're looking at a strength area there for Collingwood up against a strength area there for Melbourne. Collingwood's ability to be able to score when they go inside 50, second best in the competition. Melbourne around about 6th or 7th in the competition. So perhaps that's an area of strength there for Collingwood which they could actually exploit.
Those scores coming off the half-back line, which Collingwood are so dependent upon, given they're not coming from deep in defence, are they mainly from turnover?
Yeah, so it's mainly from turnover and a little bit from clearance, but mainly from turnover as well. So the fact that it isn't coming so deep isn't of as big a concern as what some people might actually sort of be alluding to with Collingwood. Then you go to the flip side with Melbourne. And Melbourne's game, we know what Melbourne's game is. It's all built around contest and defence, but this is where Melbourne could get Collingwood. So the last 6 weeks, Melbourne, the 4th best contested possession team in the competition, Collingwood 12th. Melbourne's ability then to be able to generate territory off the back of their contested possession wins is number 1 in the competition. So they're generating close to 4 goals a game off their territorial work, Melbourne, off the last 6 weeks. So this is Collingwood's biggest challenge. If Collingwood are able to somehow break even in this area, they're going to be absolutely in it up to their eyeballs. That's the biggest challenge in this game, I think, for Collingwood. And if they can do that, as I said, they're going to be absolutely in it
All right.
up to their eyeballs.
Question on that game. I would have thought the wet affects Melbourne's intercept marking behind the ball. How many intercept marks per game do Lever and May take? If it's wet, they aren't marking it. Is that a fair point? Do you think the wet weather suits Collingwood because of it cancels out Melbourne's interceptors?
No, I think it actually favours both teams. To be honest, I don't think it favours either of them because you get back to the contest game, and that's what a contest and the wet will bring in more of a contest game, and the contest numbers over the last 6 weeks are heavily in favour of Melbourne. So, and then you talk about the ball movement game of Collingwood. Well, if it's a wet game, that's probably going to make it a bit harder for Collingwood as well. So. I don't think the wet is actually going to bother either of these teams. Either way, I think there's a couple of other games where the conditions could actually favour and impact the game more so than this one. And I think this is why these two teams, are if not the best 2 teams in the competition, in the top 3 is because, come finals time, you can take this brand of footy anywhere. You're not relying on conditions. If you're relying on weather conditions, a bit of a red flag for me.
Can I ask you about contested marks? I did a straw poll. I did a function for a group of barristers during the week, and I asked them the same question I asked my father about 3 years ago. How many contested marks do you think there are in a game? He said 40 to 50. The average answer from the learned gentleman and our gentle women was around 35 to 50.
Oh, 35 to 50 would make it one of the best games of
Yeah.
of footy you would ever see. So the average is 10 per team per game.
Yep.
So 20 across for the whole game.
I think it's probably the most overrated aspect of our game. If I was over in America and I was celebrating our game, I'm sure I'd be talking about the high-flying contested mark. And I think most people out there listening right now would probably be of the view that there's somewhere between 25 or 50 contested marks in a game. Has that changed, say, since Cheselenko, you beauty, in the 1970 grand final? I know you wouldn't have been doing stats back then.
I wasn't even born in.
Since Champion Data have been doing stats, has that number diminished?
It's diminished a little bit, but it hasn't diminished greatly. So over the last 10 years, the game sort of hasn't really changed too much. You go back to when we first started around about 99. You're probably looking at close to 12 to 15 per team.
So
when
15's
it was
a big change to 10. That's 50% up.
very good by you, Joe.
Thank you. I'm
Do you
not
want a
great
job?
at maths. But tell me, is there a side that relies on contested marks and goals from contested marks, or is it a myth?
No, so 10 per team. You're not relying on that aspect of the game. So yeah, it is a bit of a myth, and it gets and it does get spoken about a fair bit. But
Especially in recruiting, I think there'd be many a player being recruited because they're going to take the big mark.
Looks
at
good on the
big
highlights
time.
reel. Looks
Yeah.
good on the highlights reel, but no, it's not impacting. It's not impacting overall performance.
All right, let's move on, Hoyne, because from each game you're going to look at a player that is in form. Let's start with the Pies.
Big matchup here for Melbourne is Jamie Elliott, I think. So Jamie Elliott is Collingwood's number one inform player over the last 6 weeks on the 100x rating system. His ability to be able to turn a forward 50 target into a score is up there with the best in the competition. And 13 goals, 17 marks inside 50 over the last 6 weeks. That matchup is going to be fascinating to see who they actually send, towards Jamie Elliott. And then you go to the flip end, to the other end, and we've spoken about this bloke a couple of weeks ago, Trent Rivers. So Trent Rivers is flying at the moment, a top 30 player in the competition off the 100x, and it's all to do what he's doing with ball in hand, the sixth best kick in the competition. So if you're Collingwood and potentially whether or not they go with Ginnivan and Hill and McCreary or whoever it is in that forward 50, you've got to be paying attention to this guy and what he's actually doing. Then you go to the other end and sort of looking at a couple of players for both teams and the ones that could actually lift. So Taylor Adams' finals record is actually really impressive with what he's done, if you go back to that 2018 final series, it was unbelievable what he did in that campaign. But over his last 6 weeks, he's struggling to actually impact the game, both from a ball use perspective and a ball winning perspective. So he's sort of he is spending 50-50 game time in that midfield forward role. What he's doing as a midfielder is well below expectation. What he's doing as a forward is actually performing above expectation. So I'm just wondering with this magnet on Thursday night, whether or not he actually gets some more time ahead of the ball to actually win those important contests, to be able to try and crack this defence of Melbourne, because what he's doing as a midfielder at the moment just isn't actually getting it done. And then I just spoke about Trent Rivers, and this is why, as an opposition team, not only just for this week, but for moving forward in this finals campaign, why I'm going after this guy, because Christian Salem at the moment isn't getting it done. He's not having the impact that we've probably seen from Christian Salem over a number of years. Over the last 6 weeks, he's a bottom 60 player in the competition off the 100x. His ball use, there's just no damage with ball in hand. He's number 68 of any general defender in the competition for impacting the game in that
Melbourne
aspect
people
of
will
the game.
know whether or not he's been targeted or not.
But he's still winning the ball.
Yeah,
so
okay.
so he's still winning close to 20 disposals.
There's
There's
the
no
music,
impact.
Hoyne.
Go after Trent Rivers. Don't go after Christian Salem.
All right, and your quick tip for that game, Hoyne?
Melbourne just 55-45 Melbourne, that one.
Low score.
55.
55%,
I
45.
understand.
I'm going to go a different way. I'm going to go a different way.
But let's move on to the second qualifying final. It's at the Gabba between Brisbane and Port Adelaide. Hoyne, what are the strengths and weaknesses of both sides?
Yeah, so if I'm Brisbane, I'm trying to get this game outside of stoppage for as long as you possibly can. You get the game outside of stoppage and into the transition and into the turnover game. We talk about the turnover game a lot. That's 60% of the game. If Brisbane can get that into general play as often as they possibly can, that is going to be their best chance. We've talked about this all year, that there is no better team in the competition by a long way at punishing turnovers than what Brisbane are.
But strangely, given Brisbane's plethora of midfielders, clubs are going into trench warfare and trying to turn it into a stoppage game.
Yeah, I think that they're trying to turn it into a stoppage game based off how good their turnover game is. I don't think that's around their midfield as such. I think it's trying to deny them speed, to deny them the ball movement game, and to deny their forward 50 clean access. You give Brisbane's forward 50 clean access and quick access, it's pretty much game over.
What's the role of big Oscar McInerney? Because we know he can clear the area. Like, he's going to have the size and strength against an underdone, probably Scott Lycett, but is there thought to get it on the outside, he could grab it from the ruck, and we've all seen that big 15, 20-metre handball that he's got?
I think, yeah, as I said, sort of getting back to how Port can win this, it's around stoppage. So if I'm Brisbane, get it out of that area as quickly as you possibly can. He grabs it out of the ruck more than any other ruckman in the competition. And I wouldn't be surprised if you see that on Saturday night, sort of go to another level and just clear that area, clear it away from Butters, clear it away from Rosie.
Indiscriminate 20-metre handballs.
Just get it out. Just get it out, clear it, and then let the game come into a transition game, which is your strength. And then you look at Port Adelaide, and Port Adelaide get involved in the third fewest stoppages of any team in the competition this year. I'm just wondering whether or not they need to change that strategy this week and make it a real dogfight in there.
Stoppage game. Because
aside from Carlton at the moment, their stoppage game is in the best nick of any team in the competition. And you look at their work from centre bounce this year. Over the last 6 weeks, no one's scoring more from centre bounce than what Port Adelaide do. Brisbane are conceding the 5th most points of any team from centre bounce. From overall stoppage, as I said, Carlton are the only team that are ahead of Port Adelaide at the moment in the clearance game. Brisbane are around about mid-table. That is their point of difference, and that's where they sort of, I reckon, need to get to that 75 to 80 stoppages mark. Port Adelaide are only involved in around about 55 to 60 per game. So it will be a change in philosophy. Whether or not Ken and Port Adelaide adopt that is going to be interesting to see on Saturday
sides
night.
that concede most from centre clearance generally are sides that are all duck or no dinner. They are trying to score from centre clearance rather than like St Kilda. Let's just make sure we stop them before we start attacking.
Yeah, no, that's a fair call, and I think that's a little bit back onto the Brisbane midfielders in that situation. Is just okay. Let's just try and focus on nullifying Port Adelaide in that position.
Players in form, out of form.
So if I'm looking at Brisbane, Harris Andrews is the one. So I was doing some stuff on him today, and I actually couldn't believe this. Since the last 10 weeks, he's been involved in 37 one-on-one contests, which is a big number. He's lost once. In 37 one-on-ones. I think there's a fair few that are around that mark.
Yep.
But this guy is a wall at the moment. So the last 4 weeks, 48 spoils, clearly number one in the competition, 16 intercept marks over the last 4 weeks. So he's pretty much diffusing 64 opportunities a week from the opposition. And he's needed to, because his partner in crime, Jack Payne, is a little bit out of form at the moment. So whether or not Port Adelaide can try and expose him.
Did he make you nervous, Jack?
He didn't make me nervous the first half of the year, but his last 10 or 11 weeks have been a little bit disappointing. But this guy is in unbelievable nick. And if I'm Port Adelaide, and I don't know if this is as simple as this, Kane, or not, but Butters is the one. As good as what Rosie is going at the moment, this guy is on a whole different level at the moment compared to what Rosie is. Rosie's going okay, but this guy's just flying. Number 2 player in the competition the last 6 weeks, number 3 for ball use, and number 7 from ball winning. So he gets you both ways, this guy. 8 score involvements a week over the last 6 weeks and had 30 plus in each of his last 6 games. He is the one where, if you're Brisbane, you have to go after this guy.
Dunkley goes to him?
Yeah, I think so, but I've just got this picture in my head that Dunkley and the speed of Butters is a bit of an issue. His ability and agility in that stoppage situation is going to be the one. Dunkley is the one on the other end, from a form perspective, who really needs to get going in this final series.
Maybe it's because he's doing jobs.
I think that's a bit of an out. I reckon that's a bit of an out for him. Everyone talks about Lachie Neale and how important Lachie is, and that's fair enough. But this guy at the moment is really struggling. Over the last 4 weeks, only 10 clearances for Josh Dunkley. Over the last 4 weeks, he's only had 10 contested possessions or more once in the last 4 weeks.
I reckon he's been focusing on others.
Okay. Well,
who needs to lift from Port Adelaide, Warnie?
And then, if I'm Port Adelaide, it's the 2 big guys, Finlayson and Marshall. Their returns, we just talked about how well Jamie Elliott's going from a forward 50 target. Marshall and Finlayson are nowhere near the mark.
Just
in
for
terms
Kane,
of-
Horn Francis going all right?
Horn Francis going okay.
Yeah, good.
Horn
Good.
Francis
Who's your
going
tip?
well. Brisbane for me, 60-40 this one.
60-40.
Probably 65-35 actually in favour
I
of
think
Brisbane
that's
this
probably
one.
more like it. Let's move on to the Blues, who have waited a long time to get here. They're
Yes.
taking
Go
on
Blues.
Sydney, the grand finalists from last year on Friday night. What are Carlton's strengths? And I guess you're only going to one place, and that's the engine room.
Probably one of the easiest games that I've had to analyse for the year, this one. And it's just who gets it on their terms. So clearly Carlton's strength is around stoppage and clearance. Number one for clearance.
Yep.
The concern for Sydney, they're 14th at conceding points from clearance.
Been a problem all year.
Huge
Amazing.
concern. Number one contested possession team, Carlton. Number 13, Sydney. So somehow Sydney have just got to just get anywhere near breaking even. They're probably not going to win it, but just get close to breaking even. The underrated aspect for Carlton is what they're doing behind the ball. They are the third hardest team in the competition to score against when the ball goes inside 50, and that has been a bit of a strength for the Swans. Where the Swans can get them is the flip side. So we talk about the turnover game a lot, as we just said before. They have the third best turnover game in the competition, the Swans, over the last 6 weeks. The Blues have the fourth worst turnover game. So
It's amazing how that has changed dramatically since John Longmire has been coach. I can remember having a meeting with you and one other, and it was the complete reverse.
it was. And it's sort of, it's pretty much just as simple as that. If Sydney can somehow break even
Yep.
in this midfield group, they're going to be a chance given how well their turnover game is going compared to Carlton. But if they don't, and if they concede 60, sort of entries like they've been conceding over the last 6 weeks because their clearance and contest game is so poor, then that's just probably going to feed into who is the best player in the competition at the moment, and that is Charlie Curnow. So very, very simple game to analyse on Friday night.
Who gets Charlie Curnow, do you reckon, Kane?
McCartan,
Yep.
I would have thought. And then, Harry Mackay's got an opportunity against an undersized opponent, probably Rampy.
Did you have a answer on that relationship between Mackay and Curnow?
So Charlie, if you take away the West Coast performances,
Yes, okay.
so Charlie's performances with Harry in the team are actually better than when Harry's actually out of the team as well. Just keep an eye on, I'll give a little shout out to one of our guys back office, Corey Mobilio. Just give a little shout out to Robbie Fox. He
Yeah.
might be the one who actually might get Charlie Curnow on the weekend.
He had a good final series last
He had
year.
a really good final series, and when he's played on key names this year, he's actually got a pretty good record.
Don't
Who,
mind
who
it.
was that?
He
Who was
played-
the shout out to?
Corey Mobilio, just one of
Corey.
our analysts in the back room, just doing some good things
It's
as
a
well.
good one
So-
because he did Jeremy Cameron in the grand final and was
did.
probably one of their better performers. This person's got an out for Dunkley. This is Joe. Dunkley stated on his podcast last week that he's currently carrying quite a few niggles, including an ankle. Pointing, so I'm not
Sorry,
sure.
Josh.
I'm
Sorry, Josh.
I'm
I
not
just
sure
analysed the data.
No, I'm not sure that's a good enough out either. It's finals time. You got to bring your
Yes.
best. All right, where are we up to?
So player for the Blues to watch who's in form at
Yep.
the moment, Nick
Who is it?
Newman. So clearly Charlie Curnow's on fire. Nick
Yep.
Newman for the Swans. You've got to do something about him. His ability to be able to control the game through just taking marks and then sort of protecting their back six is really important. GWS took that away. He only had 4 marks against GWS on the weekend. In the previous 5 weeks, he'd been averaging 10. So just
Wicks.
controlling it.
Wayward.
So just, do something about this guy behind the ball just to be able to nullify what he's doing. And then for the Swans, the good thing for the Swans, I think, at the moment, is that Chad Warner is back. He's back to actually starting to impact games. We know what he did last year's finals campaign, and especially on grand final day, having the 5th most impact of any midfielder in the competition over the last 6 weeks. 6 goals in 6 weeks.
What's his kick rating been like in the last 5 weeks?
Yeah, well above AFL average. So going really well. I just want to put this on the agenda for Carlton supporters as well. Tom De Koning. And I'm not putting him out of form. I'm just looking at it in terms of his best position. And it is so obvious. The last 6 weeks, he is clearly a ruckman. He's not a forward.
Did they play Pitnet?
No, I wouldn't be playing Pitnet. I would be keeping this really simple. Let this guy, let this guy go. As a ruckman over the last 6 weeks, 8th best ruckman in the competition. As a forward, 6th worst forward in the competition.
Does Harry go into the ruck to
Let
give him a spell?
Just give him 5 minutes.
Yep.
5 minutes a quarter. I mean, the second ruck roll, we talk about it a lot. It's 5 minutes a quarter. It's 20 minutes a game. Don't worry about it. Don't lose sleep over it. So
he needs to lift for the Blues. Who needs to lift for the Swans?
and then this might surprise people. Luke Parker. So Luke Parker needs to get going. If there any chance to minimise the damage from contest and clearance, this guy is so important. He's a bottom 25 player in the competition the last 6 weeks. Only had 20 plus disposals in 3 of 6 matches. Under double figure contested possessions in 3 of 6 matches, and hasn't kicked a goal for 2 months. So
despite spending some time in the forward.
So he needs to get going, as I said, to minimise the impact that Carlton could have at the contest and clearance game.
Who wins?
Carlton for me, 60-40 this one.
All right, let's move on to the final game because there's a lot of Saints fans edgy on the text asking a few selection questions, but we'll start with their strengths. What's their best bet to get this job done?
So I think Ross coming up with a sort of with a master plan is probably going to be their best strength. So number 2 team in terms of just raw points against over the last 6 weeks, which is going to be fascinating, coming up against the number 1 offensive team in the competition over the last 6 weeks. And then their ability, like Collingwood, to be able to move the ball from that defensive midfield halfback area is number 1 in the competition, along with Collingwood there. GWS are the second hardest team in the comp to move it against in that area of the ground.
How are they moving at St Kilda by the short kick?
So short kick, high uncontested marking game, which GWS can take away. Then you go to the Giants, and we spoke about this last week. They are the number 1 turnover team in the competition over the last 6 weeks, and by a long way. The Saints' turnover game is about mid-table. So there is a bit of a gap in terms of that area. And we just talked about St Kilda and how good they are defensively. This mob shouldn't be underrated either. They are the hardest team over the last 6 weeks to actually turn possession into a score against. And the more I look at their profile, and the more I look at it and go, if this campaign, this home and away season had gone for another 4 weeks, I reckon they're finishing close to top 4. And they're actually a legitimate chance to actually do some significant damage in terms of being able to hold up the Premiership Cup, given how well their profile is at the moment.
Does the data tell you whether Sam Taylor should or shouldn't play with that hamstring?
Well, I don't want to go off injury, just given that I just got whacked for an injury assessment before. So I'll stay in my lane there, Joe.
In form for the Saints, Sweeney?
So Mason Wood's really important for St Kilda. On Saturday, his first probably half of the season sort of mirrored what St Kilda were able to do. Up there with one of the best rated wingmen in the competition. He's back to being the second highest rated winger over the last 6 weeks. Racking up a lot of the ball, was really impactful in the first half against Brisbane until Ross moved him forward. So he's going to be sort of really significant in terms of that link up play to see whether or not St Kilda can get this marking game going. 56 marks he's taken over the last 6 weeks. That's a high number.
Yep.
So just wonder whether or not GWS need to just do some and spend some time minimising that impact.
Off the top, where would he be in their best and fairest?
Probably, I reckon he'd be definitely top 5. I reckon I'd go top 3.
Yep.
Yeah, probably Sinclair, Marshall, and then probably him. I would have thought he'll be up there.
Giants have got a few.
Giants, one to watch. I'm so happy with what this guy's doing at the moment, and that's Lachie Whitfield.
Yep.
Adam Kingsley needs a lot of credit with this guy. He has been moved everywhere over the last 4 or 5 years, wing, back, midfield, forward. Adam Kingsley's come in, and I'm fascinated by this, over the whole season, 100% game time, down back. Hasn't gone anywhere. Not one game has he played in a different role. He's playing permanently down back. We talk a lot about Jack Sinclair, and rightly so. That bloke is an absolute freak. This guy, over the last 2 months of the season, is putting up numbers and has a very similar profile now to Jack Sinclair. So if you're St Kilda, you've got to put some time into this guy. No one is involved in more scores as a defender than what Lachie Whitfield is this year.
He's back to his very best, isn't he?
Oh, it's great. And it's great to just see him playing the role that made him such a dynamic player, 4, 5, 6 years ago.
There was a great quote from Jimmy Bartell in Robbo's column a couple of, I think it was yesterday, when he pushed up for him, Adam Kingsley, to be Coach of the Year. And Bartell basically contrasted Cameron's style with Kingsley's style. And it was a really good quote.
Yeah, no, and we spoke about that last week. It's a great system that Kingsley's got, and I'm excited for GWS moving forward beyond this campaign as well.
Who needs to lift from each team?
So down back, if I'm St Kilda, I'm a little bit nervous about Josh Battle. I'm trying to expose that magnet if I'm GWS. His performances over the last couple of weeks, sort of makes him a bottom 15 player in the competition. So given how potent GWS have been offensively, given they've got so many options in that forward 50 outside of Toby Green to hit the scoreboard, a little bit worried about him. And then if I'm GWS, I'm a little bit worried about a winger, given that we just spoke about Mason Wood, and I'm a little bit worried about Isaac Cumming. So whether or not we just need to sort of pay a little bit of attention to Mason Wood on the wing, he's not having the impact that we've seen Cumming have over the last couple of years with ball in hand, just not racking up enough of the footy. So whether or not he needs to play more of a negating role to minimise the asset of Mason Wood.
Who wins, Hoyne?
GWS for me, I'm going probably 60-40 GWS.
That's how he sees it.